The sun was just cresting over the rolling hills of Pine Ridge County when I finally signed the papers on the old Harrington Ranch, 50 acres of quiet grassland, a sturdy barn, a rambling farmhouse, and a creek that sang all year round. I'd spent 20 years wearing the sheriff's badge, chasing down meth labs and breaking up bar fights. But this place felt like the first real peace I'd ever bought. My younger brother, Caleb, needed it more than I did. 10 years in the Marines, 2 tours in Afghanistan, and a roadside bomb had left him with a limp, nightmares that woke him screaming, and a 1,000-yard stare that no VA counselor could fix. The doctors said wide-open spaces, animals, and routine might help where pills couldn't. So I cashed in every favor, drained my savings, and brought him home. For the first few months, it worked. Caleb fed the horses at dawn, fixed fences in the afternoon sun, and sat on the porch at dusk with a cup of coffee that he actually finished. I'd drive out after my shift, kick off my boots, and listen to the crickets instead of dispatch radios. We were healing. Then Evelyn Hargrove arrived. She pulled up one Saturday morning in a gleaming white Escalade that looked ridiculous on our gravel road. Designer sunglasses, perfect blonde bob, clipboard in hand, like she was conducting an inspection for the Queen. She introduced herself as the president of the Willow Creek Meadows Homeowners Association, the upscale subdivision that butted up against my eastern fence line. Apparently, my ranch was now adjacent to their community, and that meant it fell under certain aesthetic guidelines. I politely explained that 50 acres of working ranch land predated their gated McMansions by about a century and wasn't part of any HOA. She smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes and said we'd see about that. Her son, Mason, was the real problem. 32 years old, 3 kids he barely saw, and a pending custody battle with his ex-wife, Sarah. Mason had bounced from job to job, real estate flips, crypto schemes, some failed food truck empire, and now he was living in his mother's basement. According to Evelyn, what Mason really needed was stability. And apparently the perfect place to find that stability was my ranch. Started small. Mason would accidentally open a gate and let his dirt bike rip across my pastures. He'd park on my access road, blasting music until midnight. I put up no trespassing signs. He treated them like target practice. Trail cameras caught him at 2 a.m., walking the fence line with a flashlight, taking photos of the creek and the flat meadow near the barn. When I confronted Evelyn at the county courthouse, she'd filed some nonsense complaint about my horses devaluing her neighborhood. She didn't even pretend to be embarrassed. My son needs space for the children, she said, chin tilted up. A real home, not that crumbling eyesore you're squatting in. The judge will see reason when it's about the welfare of innocent kids. I laughed out loud, which probably wasn't smart. But the idea that a family court judge would hand over my legally purchased property to a deadbeat because he wanted a bigger backyard was insane. That's when the sabotage began. First, sections of fence were cut in the dead of night, clean, precise cuts that let my horses wander onto the highway. Then the main irrigation line from the creek was sliced, flooding 20 acres and drowning a season's worth of hay. My trail cameras started going offline. One by one, wires chewed through or lenses sprayed with paint. I replaced them with better ones, hidden higher. The footage showed Mason and a buddy in black hoodies, laughing as they smashed the lenses. I could have arrested him a dozen times over, but I knew how this would play in court. Overzealous sheriff harassing a father trying to build a future for his children. Evelyn was already planting stories with local bloggers about how the out-of-touch county sheriff was bullying a single dad. I needed something airtight. Help came from an unexpected place. Sarah, Mason's ex-wife, called me one evening. She'd seen the online chatter and recognized the pattern. Mason had pulled the same stunt twice before. Find a nice piece of rural land near new developments, harass the owner until they sold cheap, then flip it to developers his mother knew through the HOA network. This time, though, the plan was bigger. Hidden in their texts, Sarah still had access to an old shared account, were messages about turning my ranch into Ridgeview Glamping Resort. Luxury tents, a wedding pavilion by the creek, and 20 exclusive lots for second homes. Evelyn's HOA friends were already lined up as investors. Sarah wanted Mason stopped, not just for her kids, but because she was tired of watching him ruin lives. She forwarded me everything, screenshots, voice messages, even bank records showing payments to the guys helping with the vandalism. Now I had evidence of conspiracy, destruction of property, and attempted fraud. But I wanted more than an arrest. I wanted it to end permanently, so I set a trap. I knew Mason's ego wouldn't let him stop. The glamping fantasy was too close. He could almost taste the money. The creek crossing near the back 40 had an old wooden bridge, sturdy enough for horses but not built for heavy loads. I quietly hired a civil engineer I trusted, an old army buddy who owed me a favor, and we replaced key supports with engineered shear pins designed to fail under calculated weight. Then I spread the word through a couple of loose-lipped deputies that I'd be out of town for a long weekend on a training conference. The cameras stayed live, feeding to a cloud account only I could access. Friday night, just after midnight, Mason showed up with his usual accomplice and a third guy I didn't recognize. Probably the site prep contractor from the texts. They brought bolt cutters, spray paint, and a chainsaw. Their plan was simple. Take out the remaining irrigation pumps, flood the lower fields one last time, and make the place unlivable. Then Evelyn would swoop in with a lowball offer I'd be desperate to accept. Mason roared across the meadow on his new side-by-side UTV, headlights off. Whooping like this was the final victory lap. He hit the bridge doing at least 30. For a split second, everything held. Then the shear pins snapped exactly as designed. The whole deck dropped 6 feet into the creek below, flipping the UTV sideways into 3 feet of rushing water. The crash was loud enough to wake half the county. By the time Mason and his buddies crawled out, wet, muddy, and screaming obscenities, 3 patrol units were already rolling up the drive, lights flashing. I'd been watching the feed from my truck, parked just out of sight. Deputy Ramirez read them their rights while they stood dripping in the headlights. And then Evelyn arrived. She screeched up in that same white Escalade, still in her silk pajamas and a fur coat, demanding to know why her son was being manhandled. She tried the usual routine, threatening lawsuits, name-dropping the county commissioner she plays tennis with, insisting this was all a misunderstanding about a father providing for his family. I stepped forward, badge glinting under the floodlights, and handed her a copy of the search warrant we'd already obtained for her phone and financial records. "Ma'am," I said, voice calm, "your son just committed felony vandalism, conspiracy, and attempted theft by deception on camera, and you're on the text chain discussing profit splits. I suggest you remain silent until you speak with an attorney." For the first time since I'd met her, Evelyn Hargrove had nothing to say. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Behind her, a news van from the local station pulled up, tipped off anonymously, of course, and started rolling. Mason went to jail that night. The charges stuck. Criminal mischief, conspiracy, trespassing, and a few extras once we traced the payments. Evelyn's HOA empire started crumbling the next week when members discovered she'd been steering landscaping contracts to companies owned by her shell LLCs. The glamping resort dream died before it ever broke ground. Caleb and I rebuilt the bridge, properly this time. We added a few more horses, planted new hay, and watched the creek run clear again. Some nights I still hear ATVs in the distance, but they stick to the subdivision trails now. Peace isn't free. Sometimes you have to fight for it, quietly, carefully, and on your own terms. But once you win it back, nobody takes it from you again.